Excellent. So, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate that. Today's webinar is all about home selling. I call it the first time home seller webinar, but you know what? It's such a unique market, honestly, that right now this is just a fresh take on what to do to be a successful home seller in today's market, no matter if you've sold before or not, because things have changed a lot and things are still changing. So in such an important transition and transaction, it's always good to be up to speed of what you can do to make this the best possible experience and most profitable experience as a home seller. So let's dive into it. First, a little bit about me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a full-time realtor with over 10 years experience in the greater Boston area. I also work up through the North Shore, and I live in Stoneham with my husband and 3 kids. I also love to help people invest in real estate, and I've written a book called You Can Have It All with Real Estate, helping people to learn more about it and feel more comfortable diving into investing. And if you're wondering, so I work with Keller Williams Realty based in Cambridge, and my team is Big Picture Realty. As you can see here in the logo, that is a little nod to my first career, which was in filmmaking, actually. And I was a producer. I worked in independent film, and I also worked at a talent agency and assisted a talent agent who worked with writers and directors, mostly in TV. And as I see it, you know, in those days, I helped bring a vision to reality and like a script to a moving picture. And these days, I still help people realize a vision, but in real life and in real estate. So that's why I chose that team name. So this is me actually back in LA when I lived there for 4 years with my husband, and we had just bought our first home, which was a condo. This was in 2009, and as you can see, I was ready to pop with our first son, Benjamin. And what happened? Well, soon after we bought the condo and had our baby, our priorities shifted, and I no longer wanted to work those grueling hours in Hollywood. I wanted to focus on the new baby and spend as much time as I could with him. And my husband felt much the same. And we also wanted to be closer to both of our families who live in New England and let our child grow up, you know, surrounded with grandparents and aunts and uncles and all of his extended family. So we decided to move back cross country and sell that condo that we'd bought less than a year ago, which wasn't the plan. And it was a very, you know, initially wasn't the plan. And it was a very down market. It was 2010. And it wasn't easy to sell that condo. It took longer than we anticipated. We had to make a price reduction. And to be honest, it was really stressful, you know, on top of the big career change and life change and moving cross country, the sale itself was stressful. So I always think about that when I'm helping sellers because I really leaned on my agent during that time. She so happened to work with Keller Williams. She was really good and she really coached me through and helped me get through it. And so I try to be that resource for my sellers. I know there's a lot going on, usually around the sale of a property. It's not just a transaction, it's your next phase of life, and whatever that looks like for you, it's taking you to that next level. So I when I work with sellers, I take the time to learn about what that means to them and what the goal is in their personal life as well as in real estate so that I can really help them make that adjustment and that big change. All right, so enough about me. I'd really love to learn what your burning questions are and why you're here today. So, of course, I have a presentation for you, but if you feel so moved, I'd love to hear what your questions are right now. So feel free to use the comment box and or unmute yourself and throw out a question.
Hey, Carrie, how are you?
All good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm bumming that I can't see your picture, but I heard you say something about your son with gaming. So it is what it is, right? You got to move on. I don't have any major questions because I am not selling. I basically wanted to come to really, you know, open my mind to all of these things that you do for a living because I think it's quite amazing. I don't know if I'll ever invest in the future, but yeah, so I wanted to come and learn and just see what it's all about.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate you being here. So thank you. Excellent. Yeah, and I really appreciate everyone being here. And if no one has a specific question that they want to bring up now, I'm going to address the frequently asked questions that I hear from my clients and my potential clients and sellers. So we'll look at that. And if throughout, I want this to be interactive. So throughout, if you have a question, feel free to speak up or use the Q&A box. All right. Okay, so one of the biggest questions or most frequent questions that I get is, when is the best time to sell? And I think right now, with what's going on in the market, with the very high appreciation that we've seen, especially in the past year. I mean, single families in Massachusetts have on average gone up 19% in the past year, which is just like unheard of. Condos are a little more normal, around 3 to 5%, which is normal. And multifamilies are only around a couple percent, but single families have really seen amazing appreciation in the past year. So a lot of potential sellers, I think, are holding off perhaps because they think, well, it might go up more, right? Prices are still going up. So I don't want to sell too early and miss out on a greater profit. And the thing I would say about that is, yes, that might be true, but also we won't know the top of this hike in appreciation until it's over, right? Until we're going down the other side. So it's really impossible to time the market. You know, while it does seem that, you know, things will keep continuing to be strong, you just don't know. Nobody knows. If they did, they'd be a billionaire. Nobody can predict the market. It does change day to day and week to week and month to month. We've seen the market turn on a dime in the past, you know. So when is the best time to sell? Well, it always comes down to supply and demand. And that's what drives the market dynamics. It's really just economics 101. When there's greater demand than there is supply, prices go up. When there's greater supply than there is demand, like back in 2010, like I was just talking about when I sold my first condo, there were so many foreclosures and short sales that prices were really down. So that's really what we want to look at. And as we know right now, and during COVID, there's been a increased, exacerbated shortage of inventory. For the past, since 2012 or so, there's been a shortage of inventory. There's been more demand than supply in this area due to the fact that during the housing crash, the new construction starts virtually stopped. In other words, people weren't building homes during that time because there wasn't the demand. But then when they started again in 2012, 2013, we never caught up to the demand. And so the supply has been lagging behind the demand for the past 8-9 years. And with COVID, that just made the situation worse because sellers didn't want to let people in their homes, or people that would have sold during that year didn't want to let people in their homes. They were, rightfully nervous about COVID. And so there became an even more increased lack of supply. Plus the demand was sky high and is sky high because of the low interest rates that is motivating buyers, especially first-time buyers, to get into the market and to move and to buy. So that's where we are right now. But as we know, things with COVID are starting to calm down. Over 70% of the state is now vaccinated, which is great. And the guidelines are loosening. Next week, the state of emergency ends in Massachusetts. And so we are most likely going to see now more sellers coming to the market. I know I've got people in my pipeline that are saying, yep, when the coast is clear, when COVID's, no longer a concern, for the most part, we are going to move. So I don't know if that will happen gradually or be a huge influx of sellers. Most likely it'd be somewhat gradually, but during the latter part of this year, we will probably see more inventory coming to the market as COVID subsides and becomes less of a concern. So all that being said is that the best time to sell is when the supply is low and the demand is high. You don't want to wait until all of a sudden the supply is higher than the demand, right? It's kind of like Warren Buffett always says, you want to zig when other people zag. So you don't want to sell when everyone's selling. You want to sell when less people are selling and buy when less people are buying. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay, great. Moving on. Okay, so another frequently asked question is, what are the costs of selling? And before I list a property, I always present the client with a breakdown of the estimated net proceeds of their sale. So this is just an example. First, the reason for the two columns is there's a low price and a high price. So I give like a 5% swing in between. This is actually a little narrower than that, but just to give an idea, because ultimately the market decides the price. So there could be a little bit of a ballpark there. And then what your loan amount is. So you'll fill that part out and then you'll get your net equity in the property, the sales price minus the loan amount. And then below you see the estimated selling and closing costs. There's a brokerage fee, which in our market tends to be around, between 3 and 6%. It is negotiable like everything else in real estate, but that's the general range. And then the other fees are the smoke detector inspection. It's a required inspection in Massachusetts before the closing. The seller has to provide a certificate saying that their smoke and carbon monoxide detectors are up to date and they're functioning. And the fee for this ranges by town or city. It's usually $25 to $50 per unit. And I'll arrange for that and pay for it and then be reimbursed at closing. Then there's an attorney fee. So Massachusetts is an attorney state, meaning that we have attorneys represent the buyer and the seller. And the attorney is going to facilitate, well, they're going to draft and review the purchase and sale for you. And they'll work with the buyer's attorney on any addendums that they might have, any revisions, and they'll work to finalize something that works for both parties. They'll also prepare the closing documents for the closing and review those with you as well. And basically they're just, it's an important transaction. You want to make sure that everything is done right. They'll also help you with title insurance as well. And make sure, I want to put emphasis on this, make sure you always work with a real estate attorney. There are a lot of divorce attorneys, estate attorneys, even defense attorneys that say they do real estate on the side. Don't go with someone like that. Go with someone that does this day in, day out, because there are certain things that come up that they may not be familiar with, or they may not realize are commonplace in real estate. And I've had this kind of thing really screw up a deal when an attorney who's not a specialist in real estate doesn't realize something is normal, or they, redline something that shouldn't be, and things like that. It can make a mess of things. So definitely use someone who is a real estate attorney, and it should be a flat fee, not an hourly fee. It varies, of course, but I would say on average it's around 1,000, maybe up to 1,800, something like that, depending on their experience, their expertise, and the specific services they provide. And as a seller, your attorney really should attend the closing on your behalf. You should give them power of attorney. And even before COVID, that was the best way to do it, just for liability reasons. You can sign everything ahead of time, and then the buyer will attend the closing because they've got mortgage documents that they need to sign the day of. but you, the seller, can do everything ahead of time. So especially with COVID too, that has become pretty much the standard, that the seller does not attend the closing. The attorney takes power of attorney for them. And then there's like miscellaneous mortgage payoff and courier types of fees that might be a few $100s. And a lot of sellers don't know about the stamps tax. In Massachusetts, there's what we call a stamps tax. And basically, it's every time you sell a property, you pay this tax to the state. It's $4.56 per $1,000 of sale price. So as you can see here for this property, which was about $450,000 sale price, it's a couple $1,000s in stamps tax. So just to make sure you're aware of that. And then you have your estimate of your seller's proceeds. Any questions? Okay, great. All right. And then I want to just address the elephant in the room, because I think, especially in a hot market, people will often say, well, maybe I don't need a broker. Maybe, I'll just do this myself, and I get that. I know people want to save money. I do too. And if I thought I could save this money doing this myself, I probably would, right? But here are the reasons that it is important to use a broker, even in a hot market, maybe especially in a hot market. Firstly, marketing, which equals more exposure. Your marketing is your exposure, and that creates the most demand. So going back to supply and demand, you want the most demand gives you the most money. Professional negotiation, number 2, and then transaction management, and also liability. So as a broker, we carry errors and omissions insurance, E&O insurance, which means that if there's something wrong with the listing, if there's some kind of error or omission, we have insurance against that. So we take that liability off of you, the seller. If you don't work with a broker, you could be sued if there's an error or omission in the way that you market the property. So that in itself is a big reason to hire a broker. Nicole asked, is a broker the same thing as a real estate agent? No, actually it's not. A broker is an agent who, to be a broker, you have to have been an agent in Massachusetts for at least 2 years. And then you go and take another test to get your broker's license. And that means that you can now hire agents to work for you in your office. And you can also, hold an escrow account, so you can hold the funds in your own account. And you're your own operation, rather than with a real estate agent, you have to work for a broker, and the broker is the responsible party. So they would be, for example, carrying the errors and omission insurance, like I just mentioned, and things like that. So a broker has more responsibility, and they're actually, when you list a property, you're listing technically with the broker or the brokerage. So when someone lists with me, they're listing with Keller Williams Cambridge, and I'm the designated agent for that client. So good question. So let's see. Okay, so back to the reason people often choose for sale by owner, right? It comes down to money. They want to net the most money that they can from the sale, and yet typically they're actually leaving money on the table. This chart is from April 2021, and it's pulled by the National Association of Realtors, showing how homes sold with an agent on average compare to sale prices that are sold for sale by owner. And as you can see, even in a hot market, it's actually more, because typically I see these charts and it's somewhere around 12 to 15% difference. This is like a 35% difference between homes sold with an agent and then all for sale by owners here on the left. And again, that comes, I think what this is showing is, because of the marketing that you get when you sell with an agent and the exposure that you get, you're most likely going to have a bidding war, right? Especially in a hot market. So if you have 25 buyers competing for your home, guess what happens to the price? It can go way up. And we've all heard the crazy stories about today's market. It's, $100,000 over asking and so forth. And yet, if you're selling for sale by owner and maybe only advertising on 1 or 2 websites or word of mouth, you're not going to see the impact of that exposure. Also, the negotiation. If you've never handled a bidding war before, you might not know the best strategies to really gain the most out of that bidding war. There are ways to go about it, and there are ways that you can make sure you do get the best possible price, navigating that whole scenario, which can be stressful if you've never handled a bidding war before in real estate. So I had a seller a week or 2 ago in Arlington, Massachusetts, a condo, and it was a 2-family that had been converted to a condo. So it was a small condo association, and the other owner in the condo association actually wanted to buy the unit themselves. They had said that they're interested in buying it. And my seller was considering selling to the other unit owner. So I said to them, well, listen, why don't we do this? Why don't we make them a named exclusion? And by the way, this happens a lot where you talk about you want to sell a property and all of a sudden, like, there's a family member, a friend, a neighbor that's interested in buying it, right? It happens more often than not. So it's pretty common that I'll do a named exclusion for that person, saying in the listing contract itself, if that person ends up being the buyer, in other words, they bring the best offer and you choose them to purchase a property, even after we're on the market, they're excluded from the listing agreement. So you don't pay a commission. And that way, there's no loss to you. You're not going to lose the direct buyer, but you still get to see what the market will bear and get the benefit of the full exposure. And the reason I offer this to sellers is because 99.9% of the time, the market's going to bear more money and you're going to end up going with a buyer that I bring you and not the direct buyer. And that's kind of like this middle column here is showing the direct buyer where the for sale by owner already knows the buyer ahead of time. Typically, there's a huge discount. Okay, so that's kind of what that is showing in the middle. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that, because that is an option. If you're like procrastinating or holding off because you think someone might make an offer directly where you not have to pay a commission, you don't have to wait for them. You can go ahead and list your property and just have a named exclusion there in place that if they ever do make an offer, you would not have to pay a commission if you accepted the offer. Okay. I should have asked, was there any questions on that last part? Frank said, a broker also has a realtor designation that makes them have to adhere to the real estate code of ethics, whereas an agent who doesn't have that designation doesn't have to. True, although I am a realtor. Agents can be realtors, but yes. Okay. So this is another question that comes up a lot, again, because we're in such a hot market. People wonder, well, if I sell my home, right? We know it's a hot market, it's going to sell fast, but what if I can't find a home to actually purchase? And, nobody wants to end up being homeless. And so I always recommend this strategy, which is, yes, you still want to sell first, but you can make the sale subject to your finding suitable new housing. And we put that right in the listing and make it evident to all the potential buyers that we're going to need some flexibility on the timing. And because it's a hot market, buyers don't mind doing that. They're going to bend over backwards to get that home, right? So this way, the benefit for you is that you put your current home under agreement for a firm price. You know what you have to work with in terms of equity to take and buy your new home. And yet you have not only flexibility in the timing, which I've seen people have up to 6 months after putting their home under agreement to find their new home, but you also have less pressure because you know that if you don't find something, you can actually call off the whole deal. And so, yeah, and so it's great. It just takes the pressure off, and it means that you're a stronger buyer on your purchase as well, because you can show the seller of your potential new home, look, I've got my home under agreement, and the equity is going to be free and clear as soon as we close. I had a seller do this just last week, and it's funny how things fall into place, because we got their home under agreement within a week, their current home, and then they had to go find a home, and they were so nervous about it. We talked about it so much, like, hope they find a new home. Guess what? They found a home that weekend that they absolutely love. And I think, and I've had this happen many times, I think it's just because they don't feel under pressure, because they know that they're in a strong place, and they have leverage as a buyer because they've got that home under agreement, and then it just kind of organically kind of falls into place. But also, you can use this strategy in tandem with a use and occupancy agreement, so that you can even give yourself time after the closing if you feel you need it, up to 60 days to continue packing, moving, or to close on that new home. You can have up to 60 days. And the 60 days for the use and occupancy is based on the mortgage of the buyer for your home. If they're getting a mortgage for an owner occupant, meaning that they are planning to live in the property, then the lender wants to have them move in no more than 60 days after the closing. So that's why the use and occupancy is up to 60 days. Now, if you happen to have a cash buyer for your home, you could have that use and occupancy be for as long as you want. But do understand that you'll pay a rent during that use and occupancy period, because you are now technically renting from the new owner. So usually the rent is based on holding costs, mortgage, and taxes for the new owner. So your buyer's holding costs will become basically your rent. It is negotiable. Everything in real estate is negotiable, but typically that's how we work it out. But it just gives you even more flexibility to, again, get you where you need to go and not have to move twice, for example. Any questions about that? I hope everything made sense. Okay, good. Okay, so I also just wanted to give you a quick overview of the listing timeline. It's pretty straightforward. You know, sometimes people come to me and they're like, well, we want to list and be on the market and start showing this weekend. But more often than not, there is a preparation phase. We can do it really fast if needed, but usually there's a little bit of a prep phase, a few weeks or sometimes a few months, where I can recommend touch-ups on the home that are going to give you the most bang for your buck. There might be some staging opportunity, some ways to spruce up the curb appeal. Right now in today's market, I wouldn't recommend doing like major renovations to increase the sale price of your home, just because if you are doing that and it takes 6 months or a year, you might miss the market. So it's probably better just to maybe do some small touch-ups and make sure that you strike while the iron is hot, because again, the market could change and does change daily. So do that, take advantage of it. But yes, there might be some little things that could be done. And then we'll schedule photography. I have a professional photographer who comes in and does some amazing photos, as well as floor plans and virtual tours, right? The interactive tours that are really cool. And we'll tentatively pencil in a listing date and a showing date at that time as well. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but we'll just have something as a marker. And then we'll move to the listing setup. So I'll be drafting a thorough listing sheet for you. We want to make sure it's as thorough as possible so that buyers really feel confident stepping up with their best offer, knowing that they have the best information. There'll be some disclosures, lead paint disclosure with anything built before 1978. We just, as a seller, you have to disclose whether or not you've ever had it tested for lead paint. If you have any records regarding lead paint, more often than not, people have not or do not have records. So we'll just disclose that. And then I'll send you the listing to review before we actually post it so that you can have an opportunity to tell me if there's any edits or comments, anything that should be changed. And then basically it's just making sure we have the sign up, finalizing a showing strategy. And that really depends on whether or not the home, whether you live in the home or if it's vacant or if there's a tenant in the home, your comfort level and convenience to you. You know, a lot of times right now we hold off showings until the weekend and try to group together showings, obviously somewhat staggered. We don't want like a million people at your home at one time, but it's better, I think, to have everyone in a certain time frame, like maybe a couple hours on a Saturday or Sunday or both. That way you're not getting showing requests randomly all throughout the weekend or the week. But we'll finalize that at that point. And then we go to active marketing on the MLS. And with Keller Williams, we have it on over 400 other websites as well. I'll also directly contact agents who have buyer matches for your property and make sure that every agent in Massachusetts knows about your property. And I'll do a social media targeted campaign. One other benefit of Keller Williams is that we have an exclusive agreement with Facebook so that when I do a social media targeted ad and somebody clicks on the ad, I automatically get their contact information from Facebook rather than them having to put in the information, which often turns out to be inaccurate, or they just don't put in any contact information. We get it automatically, and that means that I can immediately follow up with them and invite them to the open house or talk to them about your property. I also campaign or canvas around your neighborhood and invite your neighbors to share the information or to actually come to the open house. A lot of times neighbors have family and friends that want to move closer to them, or have people that might be interested, and they have the opportunity to then choose their neighbor, which they love. So that's another part of the marketing that happens that first week. And the goal is going to be to get the home under agreement within a week or two, but usually within a week of going onto the market. Why? Because that's when you get the most interest and the most activity, and therefore the best price. And when we do have a bidding war, which again is going to be the goal, I'll negotiate that with you. We'll talk through all the terms. We'll decide on best price, but also timing and contingencies that work best for you and your best interest. And we may or may not have an inspection. We'll have a purchase and sale. And if there's a mortgage, there will be an appraisal. And then a few days before the closing, you'll get a closing disclosure, which should look similar to the estimate of the seller's proceeds that I showed before, but they'll, be also pro ratings for things like taxes and water. If it's a condo, the association fees will have to be paid up to the closing date, of course. And there'll be any other money that's being exchanged up, at the closing table will be on that closing disclosure. And again, you'll get that 2 to 3 days before so you can review and make sure it looks accurate. There'll be a final walkthrough the day of or the day before the closing, and then the closing itself. And this is a review from a client I had last year who sold and bought their home. There's many more reviews on Zillow and on my website as well. Okay, so let's talk about the biggest mistakes sellers make. I wonder if anyone has any guesses. Okay, well, I'll tell you what it is. It's actually overpricing. That's it. It's as simple as that. And even in today's market, sellers still can overprice, believe it or not. In fact, I know we all hear the crazy stories about homes selling for way over asking, but did you know that 552 properties actually expired this past month in Massachusetts, or sorry, in Middlesex County, without selling? So it goes to show you that it's still important to price correctly. You see, the other thing is that buyers will often start with a minimal budget because, again, everybody wants to save money. But then when they see that they have to spend a little more to get what they want, they stretch their budget. So if you price competitively, you're inviting more buyers in to take a look at the home and then to fall in love with the home and decide they want to make an offer. And once they've made the decision to make an offer, they can find ways to stretch their budget, especially if they have to and it's a multiple offer situation. Um, they'll pay a little bit more than they might have originally wanted to, and so you get more people interested. So it's important to price correctly. The second question after how much does it cost that buyers ask is how long has it been on the market? And because it is such a fast market, listings often will appear stale even after a week or two on the market. Buyers are already wondering, why hasn't it sold? What's wrong with it? So a lot of times sellers will ask me, well, can't we just start high and then reduce the price later? And of course you can do that. However, just know that you are missing out on that initial 2 weeks that is the height of your activity. So once the days on market hits 14 or 21, buyers are already like, it doesn't seem as fresh. It doesn't seem as exciting. And buyers are wondering if they can negotiate with you, they can lowball you, and maybe they're just thinking something's wrong with it altogether and bypassing it. So again, another reason to really price right from the start. So that's really about it. And again, love to take more questions, but I'll just quickly review what we talked about today, the main takeaways of selling successfully in today's market. So we talked about pricing, and that's based on a research-driven analysis. Your pricing strategy should be based on a data-driven market analysis and a thorough understanding of the market to make your listing shine above the rest. Quality marketing materials. Proper presentation of the home is worth tens of thousands of dollars. So we want to make sure it's shown in the very best light online and in person. So your presentation plus exposure is going to mean more money in your pocket. And I also just want to mention a consultative approach is so important. So hire an agent who cares about your goals and always puts the relationship before the transaction. It's a business partnership. It's a business partnership, and the agent is your trusted advisor in this sale of your most important asset. And I can't stress enough the importance of transparency and communication. You want to make sure that that's really, really strong, and understand the costs and the process before you get started and every step of the way. I know for me, like when I started off with that story about moving from LA, that was super important to me, just to have that kind of transparency. So any questions? I would love to hear them if you have them. Right, well, I guess that means everything was pretty clear then. Well, here's my contact information. If you think of any questions after, please don't hesitate to reach out. Or if you'd like a market analysis, I'm happy to do that. I could, of course, do a ballpark one even without seeing the home, or come in person and give you something that's more accurate. Oh, looks like I might have a question. Hold on. Where did my chat go? I've lost my chat.
Carrie, that was just me. I was just saying very
Oh,
thorough presentation. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. And hope to chat soon. It's an exciting time to be a seller, and I would love to help. So feel free to reach out. Did anyone else have a question? Speak up if you do. Okay, great. Bye, guys.